Okay, hello everyone. My name is Chris with Wisconsin Facets, and I'd like to welcome you to our Compassion Resilience Self-Care Snapshot series with today's webinar on expectations and affirmations. Our presenter today is Emily Jonesberg, and she is the training lead with Rogers in Health, the Education and Advocacy Department of Rogers Behavioral Health, and a proud mom of an active toddler. In her role at Rogers, she facilitates trainings for leaders in the nonprofit, education, and healthcare sectors. Emily also facilitates programming for staff at Rogers Behavioral Health and with patients and parents in the community. Prior to her work at Rogers, Emily worked in a youth serving capacity for over 13 years through various nonprofits and school districts. During this time, she also developed and delivered equity training with adults and youth. Emily has a Master of Social Work and is a licensed clinical social worker. So, welcome, Emily.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be here with you all as we continue in our Compassion Resilience Self-Care Snapshot. And again, I'm Emily Jonesberg, and I'm going to be focusing today on expectations and affirmations. And before I get us into all of our content and that conversation, I do like to start with just a chance for us all to get ourselves centered and be mindful of our current state, bring us into this current moment. So I'll lead us through a very short mindfulness exercise. Feel free to participate alongside me if you'd like. So first of all, I ask that you get into a comfortable position, whatever that may be for you. For me, it's back against the back of my chair, sitting with my feet flat on the ground and relaxing my body. And then I invite you to at least take your eyes off the screen. If you're comfortable to close them, go for it, but at least give them a break from the screen. And bring your attention first to your breath. As you get in touch with your breath, do your best just to slow it down a bit. Now, as you have your attention focused on your breath, you may continue to have other thoughts, things about what happened prior to your time with us right now, or is happening in the future, or even distractions in the moment. Just do your best as those pop up to be aware of them, see them, and then let them pass. And instead, I want you to bring to mind, what is a time or place that brought you, brings you joy? What brings you joy? What kind of activity would you be doing? Or people would you be with or not with? Do your best as you continue to take slow breaths to really focus on that feeling of joy. Giving yourself permission for your full body just to enjoy that moment of joy. And as you hold on to that feeling, bring your attention fully back to your breath. Perhaps also to your surroundings, what it feels like to be sitting in your chair if you're seated. The feeling it is for your hands to be resting where they are. Bring your awareness back, and we'll take 2 more slow breaths. Thank you for that moment to pause. I love to start my time anytime I get to do a training or a meeting with folks. It's just a moment to do just that, to pause, and lots of different ways to do it. But it really has been shown to be one of those strategies that we can do individually to help build our compassion resilience and take care of ourselves. Not uncommon that we're moving and shaking a lot and don't get a lot of opportunities just to check in with how we're doing and recalibrate ourselves. I like to occasionally throw in for me some things like that, a time that brings me joy or a place that I feel calm, it helps me regulate my emotions in a new way and to bring some things back to the surface, particularly if I felt that it's been a draining day so far. It gives me some extra energy. So thanks again for participating with me in that. Our series is all focused around building the sense of compassion, resilience. And so I've shared this before in other presentations I've done, but I just want to recenter us in what the definition is of compassion, resilience. So we're really coming from a place of a position of empathy, strength, and hope. And I truly feel that this is a baseline for us humans, a place of empathy, strength, and hope. And sometimes we get pulled away from this baseline when we are witnessing, or we have daily witnessing of the struggles and challenges that those around us face in our community and that we may face ourselves. So it's our opportunity to build our muscles around compassion, resilience. And as we do that, it helps us return back to this baseline of empathy, strength, and hope quicker and quicker when we've been witness to these struggles around us. And it helps us remain optimistic in what could otherwise be seen as this unperfect world of ours. So all the strategies that we've talked about so far, and I'll be talking about today, will really be focused on building this sense of compassion, resilience. So a little bit again about what's been covered and what we've got today. We are already on our 6th of 8 self-care snapshots, started way back in January. So you'll see here a full list of the topics we've covered and we have coming in the future. I highly recommend, if you're just joining us for one of the first times, that you can go back through the Wisconsin Facets page and check out some of our previous self-care snapshots. The first few were facilitated by my colleague, Dr. Sarah Reed, and the remaining few have been facilitated by me. As I mentioned today, we're looking at expectations and affirmations, and then we have 2 more remaining for our snapshot moving forward. All of these things that we've been talking about and have talking about coming up, again, build on compassion, resilience, and also help us keep ourselves out of a place of compassion fatigue, which is my next visual. Now, we've done a whole series on compassion fatigue, so if you'd like to learn more about the nitty-gritty around this, feel free to check out that one and see some more of the background on it. But I just like it as an opportunity to ground ourselves in this, to see how this content that I'm about to go through will also be a strategy to help yourself get out of the cycle of compassion fatigue. So as a reminder, this cycle is very much normal. All humans experience this, particularly those who are in care for others that may be experiencing complex situations. So parents and caregivers certainly fit within this, and then those who work to support parents and caregivers would also be ones that most likely would experience times of compassion fatigue. And you'll see there's kind of 5 different stages to it overall. Your first one, and this could be a chance for you right now as I just quickly go through it to do a check-in with yourself. Where do you find yourself at this moment? The first is that one of zealot. So you're filling up your plate, you're super enthusiastic, you're ready to take on the world, and maybe not setting up realistic expectations, as we'll talk about today. This could move into more of a prickly place, starting to feel a little bit less ability to connect with others, and starting to see some of those imperfections in the world around you, which could then lead to a place of withdrawal, which is one of just fatigue. It's really how I like to think of it. Mental fatigue, physical fatigue, and a time when you're really unable to connect to supports around you to best care for yourself and hard to empathize with others. And then the next stage is that zombie cat one, and that's very much about survival. Are you in a place right now where it's one foot in front of the other, just trying to get stuff done, not aware of those around you, and perhaps have an inflated sense of importance, feel that you're the only one that could do a certain task or care for a loved one, or take a certain household responsibility under your wing. And then the last one is kind of a place of around compassion, resilience, or balance, a time where you feel like, yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm finding this middle ground, and I'm not feeling particularly drained in any one of these. So a chance now for you to think about, where am I right now? And know that that place is okay. And as humans, we all experience all of these stages. Some of us experience them all in one day. Sometimes it takes us over the course of a year, we'll kind of float through them, and we'll bounce around from time to time. It's really more a chance to be aware of where we're at so that we can then say, oh, I'm not a huge fan of being in my irritability stage at the moment. What can I do to help pull myself out? And one of the things that we can do to help pull ourselves out is exploring the role of expectations. And then thinking about placing affirmations in our world and our self-talk to help pull ourselves out of this place of fatigue. You even heard it referenced in my explanation of zealot. A big piece of zealot is unrealistic expectations. And then as you move throughout the cycle of compassion fatigue, certainly continuing to have unrealistic expectations or even unstated ones that you perceive that others have of you, but you haven't had a chance to clarify with them. In general, expectations, your own, you have for yourself, you have for your family members, and others have for you, can play a big role in your wellness and where you fall within this cycle of compassion fatigue. So a little bit about expectations. There's just some fun little clips here, pictures from online when you think about expectations in general and parenting. A lot of thoughts about here, I expected this, and in reality, this is more of what I see and witness. Certainly for me, as was mentioned, I'm a parent of a toddler. I have a 3.5-year-old. And before I got into parenting, I was already had a fair amount of experience working with youth, mostly middle and high school age youth, but a strong youth development background. By no means thought I had all things parenting figured out, but thought, I know a few things about young people that I can apply. And I have a few expectations in place already of what a parent should be, what a parent should do, what a parent should look like, lots of shoulds that we'll talk about here. And I realized as I got into parenting just how unrealistic a lot of those expectations were and how many unstated expectations I had of myself, things that I didn't even really realize were there, but once I realized it, I saw how much of a drain they were having on me at the same time. And I, probably like many of you, am also coming from a positive place. I have high expectations of myself. I'm a relatively competent individual. So I felt like I could tackle this new world around parenting without too much trouble. And of course, have come along the way with some bumps. And as I've experienced more and more of those bumps around parenting, some things have mounted over time. And as a result, I felt a drain on my ability to have compassion, resilience in parenting. I felt like I've had a decrease in my ability to see my worthiness as a parent, that I see my effectiveness, and overall just feeling more and more like in that zombie cat phase where it was more about survival and not much enjoyment and not much connection with my new child and even those relationships that I had prior to parenthood as well. And I realized through this that a lot of shoulds came to be. And shoulds are things that are expectations of ours, but they're ones that we think we have, but we're not meeting of ourselves. So I should be playing with my daughter more often. The expectation is that I need to spend X amount of time playing with my daughter on a regular basis, and I'm not doing it, so I'm putting a should in there. And along with shoulds, naturally then comes guilt and shame. So I've now stated an expectation, and I'm placing this guilt and shame on myself for not meeting it. Instead of perhaps taking a step back to think, is this expectation realistic, given what I have going on in front of me right now? And is it an expectation that may be realistic, but I need some additional support in order to meet? Or perhaps it's just not even fair if I really were to take a step back and say that this needs to be one that I adjust altogether. So shoulds are a dangerous place, ones that are often accompanied with not great stuff that we'll take a look at and think about how we can challenge a bit to help ourselves out. And I'd say that that's the first step to exploring expectations, is being aware of what expectations you have in the first place, and then thinking about what kind of expectation they are and how and if they need to be challenged. So that's really the next thing I'm going to have us think about, is being aware of your own expectations. I do my best in these self-care snippets to give you a chance to have a little bit of an activity, an application piece where you get to apply it to your own life. And that's what this piece is going to be about. So if you've got a scrap piece of paper nearby, if you could grab that, or pull up a Word document, or just ponder it if that's better for you, for yourself. I want you to think about your own expectations in 4 different categories. The first one is, what expectations do you have of yourself? And I want you to think about this as a caregiver, as a parent. What expectations do you have for yourself? If you're watching this and joining our webinar and you are not a parent yourself, think about how your expectations of yourself in a caregiving role, whether it's at work or perhaps with nieces and nephews or an aging parent. Take a moment to jot your example down. The next category is going to be the expectation you have of your child. What is an expectation you have of your child or a child that you work with or you support? Our third category is an expectation of a partner or an extended family member. And then our fourth is an expectation of people in that helping professions, people who support you. As you ponder that and jot some ideas down, I'll share with you the examples I have here on the slide. So for example, for the self one, an expectation I have of myself, I should always stay calm when my child is upset. For an expectation of my child should appreciate how hard I try to be a good parent. An expectation of my partner or extended family members, my partner should have the same priorities as me. And finally, my expectation of people in helping professions, the people I go to for help, should be able to give me accurate answers. So again, this can be a hard task to do. The first step to realizing its role on our well-being, the expectations that we have, is taking a step back and owning them and naming them. So do that for a moment. And as you maybe continue to think about or finish up writing some of those expectations, I want to walk through with you the different types of expectations that I see, and then I'm going to connect them back to the ones I just shared. So first type of expectation, too high. We're probably all very familiar. And I use an example next to it around kindness and an expectation I have of my child of being kind. So an explanation of too high, or example of too high expectation when it comes to kindness of my child would be, I expect my child to be kind at all times. Not realistic. Now on the opposite end, there's too low of expectations. Of course my child is mean to others, like all kids. That would be a too low of expectation of my child. Now we all have expectations that oftentimes we have in our heads, but we don't say out loud. We don't state it to the person. And we'll could explore the role then resentment comes in when we have an expectation of someone, they don't meet it, and we feel resentful that they haven't met it, and we take a step back, and in reality we never got the chance to vocalize it. So how could we assume that they'd be able to meet it if we didn't get a chance to talk about it? So my example in this case is, why do I have to tell her? Why do I have to tell her to be kind? She just ought to know she needs to be kind. I know I'm certainly guilty of the stated but unclear, just a statement of be kind. Well, certainly to my 3.5-year-old, how often I get the questions of, what does this mean? What does kind mean? I'm really having to break it down. Then there's a clearly stated, please be kind, be a kind friend by smiling and asking her if she would like to play with you. So I've had a clear expectation there. What do I mean by kind? I mean smiling and asking someone if they'd like to play. And it's very direct so that my child knows what the expectation that I have of them is. They can do their best then to meet it. And then finally is an unrecognized expectation. This is oftentimes an expectation we have that we don't even realize we have until it's not being met. So in this example, I didn't realize I expected my child to be kind in all social situations. So really, until I took a step back, I felt the tug, the nug inside of me that kept saying like, oh, she's not doing what I'm expecting, but I didn't really realize what it was until I took a step back and realized that it was because I had this, what would I say would be unrealistic expectation that she'd be kind in all social situations. So now I want you to think about the expectations that you brainstormed in that previous exercise. Which type of expectation are they? So in my examples, I should always stay calm when my child is upset. I think you probably agree with me, way too high of an expectation. At least it is for me. I cannot stay calm every time that my child gets upset. For my expectation of my child should appreciate how hard I try to be a good parent. I'd probably say this is an unrecognized expectation. It'd be something that is probably playing around in my head, and I really do expect and want her to appreciate all the energy I put into being a parent, but it's not something that I would have thought of top of mind until I took a moment to pause and really think about it. When it comes to expectations of partners or family members, my partner should have the same priority as me. Twofold here. A, I'd say it's too high of an expectation, not realistic. And I'd say there's also a not stated piece there. Certainly times when I felt, just assumed that my partner would have the same priority as I and would know what my priority is and meet that, but we didn't even get a chance to talk about it. Just because we coexist together and we have a relationship together, they should just know that. It's an example of not stated. And then finally, the people I go to for help should be able to give me accurate answers. I would say this is slightly stated but unclear, and I would add to it to make it more clear or direct me elsewhere. So the people I go to for help should be able to give me accurate answers or direct me elsewhere where I could find accurate answers. So maybe just take a moment and look at your list and think about where do they fall in these different categories of expectations. Next, I have a quick case study where I just want to take a moment to read and then have us use another example of a way in which expectations come out or what expectations we see in this. So Todd is undergoing his first parent-teacher conference in quite a while. He cares for his 13-year-old niece and hasn't gone to her conferences in recent years. He's excited to communicate with his niece's homeroom teacher because he's noticed his niece seems down a lot lately. He's discouraged to find that teacher does not appear to know his niece and doesn't seem to take the conversation as seriously as he'd hoped. After the meeting, he starts to blame the teacher for his niece's moods and feels angry that she's not getting the support she needs at school. So if we take the lens of expectations to this little scenario, I'd say both the Todd and the teacher in this scenario had unstated expectations. They didn't get a chance to start off the conference sharing what they expected with their time together. And then as a result, they didn't get a chance to check in to see if those expectations were indeed realistic. And because then they had unstated ones, they weren't able to see it was realistic, that perhaps Todd's, for example, wasn't realistic for the middle school conference space. And he didn't allow then the teacher a chance to talk about what it was he needed in order to meet his expectation, which then led to a sense of kind of resentment and frustration with the homeroom teacher. So instead, this is an opportunity we see here if we just take a step back to really check in with somebody around expectations. Not only does it help us get our needs met and get clarity about what's realistic, but it also helps that other person show up the way that they would like to show up. I'd say most teachers want to be a support for families of the students they work with, and they just need some extra help sometimes understanding what support is helpful and where the expectations fall so that they can have a conversation about it. So I want you to think about with those expectations that you outlined in the activity earlier, how might you test those expectations that you listed? By really talking with someone else, checking in with that partner, family members, checking in with those helping professionals, checking in with your child to see if indeed they're realistic. One other lens that I'd like to apply here as we wrap up our time together is thinking about temperament. It's a huge part of expectations, and when we come up with expectations of others, it's good for us to think about what kind of temperament that person brings to the situation, particularly our children, so we can adjust expectations accordingly. So there's 9 different types of temperament here outlined on the slide. And I just want to highlight for you 2 different ones that really came up for me recently with my 3.5-year-old who was playing with a friend of ours who also has a 3-year-old. It really spoke to their difference in temperament. My daughter was very excited about the upcoming play date and spoke and counted down the days to it. And then once the friend came over, because my daughter has a little bit lower in her adaptability, she has a harder time adapting to change, and she's a little bit more withdrawn around new people, that even though she had so much excitement, she withdrew from the situation and asked for more alone time and had a hard time bonding with this other child initially. And the other child came with the reverse. She did not seem to have any problems at all with new settings, new people. She was all about learning and hearing from these new individuals and was ready to engage right away. So even though they're the same age, the expectation that I would have if I was working with this friend's friend, and I bring her to a new situation, needs to be different than when I'm engaging my young daughter, who takes some more time to warm up. So thinking about how I need to adjust things so she can be successful in meeting an expectation given her temperament. And as I wrap up our quick presentation on expectations and affirmations here, the next step is just to think about with those unrealistic expectations that perhaps you brainstormed in the activity earlier, thinking about how those can be transformed into affirmations. What can we do to change the language so that we feel like they're filling us up instead of draining us? So I have 2 examples here on an unrealistic expectation turned into an affirmation. My unrealistic expectation, no matter how well I parent, it will never be good enough for my child. A lot of negative self-talk there, right? And unrealistic. So turning that into an affirmation, I am good enough today as the person I am. While I will strive to do better in my parenting, I accept who I am today. Very much realistic, accepting who I am today and affirming to ourselves. One more example, I can't feel good about myself unless I am successful in alleviating my child's challenges. Completely unrealistic. No one's going to always be able to alleviate their child's challenges. So flipping that over to our affirmation, I will be there with my children as they face complex challenges. Together, we will learn what works and how to deal with what we cannot change. Again, a chance much more realistic. I'm going to be there in the moment, and together we will accomplish, we will tackle whatever the world brings our way and do our best to deal with whatever it is we cannot change. So as you think about your own unrealistic expectations, they come to the surface, do your best to think about shifting that language, getting rid of those shoulds, getting rid of those always, and making it more of an affirmation, something that leaves you feeling full. And with that, I just want to say a thank you again for joining me on this Self-Care Snap-It to talk about expectations and affirmations. I look forward to continuing to engage with you all in the next 2, and I wish you the best of luck in bringing those shoulds to the surface and eliminating them, getting rid of that guilt and shame, and focusing in again on those yeses, which connects back to our compassionate boundary setting we talked about last month. Thanks. And Chris, is there any? Yeah.
I'm going to just throw it out there right now. Again, I don't have any questions so far. So if anyone does have any, just put them in the question box and we'll take care of them. I love the shed your shoulds. I think, again, that's another little saying I can put up in my house at my desk.
Yeah, it's really powerful for us to take a step back when we hear ourselves saying that. I should be doing blah, blah, blah. It's like, come on, do I need to put the extra shame and blame on myself in the moment? Either I'm doing it or I'm not doing it. And if I'm not doing it, maybe there's a good reason.
Absolutely. Give yourself a break sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I have not gotten any questions at this point. So I guess we'll wrap up. And of course, thank you to Emily for continuing to share such meaningful information with us on this topic. Again, a reminder to our participants, there are 2 remaining sessions, July 12th Wellness Strategies, and August 9th, Connecting to Our Purpose. And you can register now for those on the Wisconsin Facets website. Thanks everyone for attending this training. The recording and the survey will be sent to you shortly, and we would greatly appreciate your completion of the survey. Helps us to plan for the future and tells us how we're doing. And so with that, we're done for today. And have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye now.
Take care. Bye-bye.